For the interview tonight is former Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder. Mr. Attorney General, it's really nice to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here with you, Rachel.
So I have a million things I want to talk to you about, as you might expect. I first want to get your reaction tonight to what we've seen from the Supreme Court. There's this young man from Maryland, a father who was arrested by the Trump administration. They sent him to a prison in El Salvador. They say it was in error, but also they have no intention of getting him back. The Supreme Court appears to have ruled tonight that they must bring him back, but also the ruling is sort of hard to parse. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet or what your reaction is to it, but I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I've not had a chance to read thoroughly the opinion, but I think you can boil it down, and people, as lawyers do, we can start to parse words here and there. But I think what the court is essentially saying is that, look, you admit that you made a mistake. You took this guy without due process, placed him in a detention facility in El Salvador, and are now saying that you can't get him back. That is unacceptable. That this man is entitled to due process. A determination has to be made as to whether or not he can be deported from the United States, and through due process that is going through the court system, he has to have the ability to put forth any arguments that he has, and then a judge is going to have to make a determination. I think that is the clear input. That's a clear, that's the obvious thing that the Supreme Court is saying. The question is going to be now, how will the Trump administration react to that? The court talks about facilitating. How are they going to, interpret that? Are they going to do it over the course of the next couple of days, the next month? And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up yet with another proceeding before the district court saying the Supreme Court said the client had to be brought back. He's not here. We demand to have him brought back as soon as is possible.
I want to ask you to reflect a little bit on what we're seeing in terms of the treatment of immigrants right now. I feel like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a person who pays attention to the news and reports the news as best as I can. But I feel like my sort of moral tuning fork, I guess it is resonating so hard I can hardly stand it in terms of the way that immigrants are being treated in one policy decision after another that all seem to rely on this basic sense that when it comes to the treatment of immigrants, there's really no law that constrains what the administration can do. And so you're seeing student visas revoked, which they have the right to do, but you're seeing students not notified of that. And the first time they find out about it is when they're snatched off the street, thrown into an unmarked car, and put into a prison when they had no idea they'd done anything wrong. Tonight, we're seeing, we're seeing some of the fallout from this El Salvador decision to put people who've had no legal process whatsoever in a foreign prison with no recourse to American justice or even to answer to the non-charges against them. We're seeing reporting from the New York Times tonight that people who registered and are in this country officially and essentially with the permission of the U.S. government under the CBP-1 app, they're having their Social Security numbers revoked, which instantly makes them not only liable to arrest and deportation, but also makes it impossible for them to continue to live in this country in any legal sense. All of this just feels like they believe no law constrains them when it comes to people who aren't U.S. citizens. And there's more that I could add to that universe, but what is your reflection on that in terms of us as a country and how the administration is treating these people among us?
Let's cut right through this. This is disgusting. It's shameful. It's inconsistent with the rule of law. And it's also inconsistent with who we say we are as a nation. And every American citizen, every inhabitant of this country should be offended by what this administration is doing. But beyond that, every citizen in this country ought to be afraid. Because the reality is, if they are successful in doing this to immigrants, and now they're doing things against American citizens, as you talked about before, who criticized the president, it won't be too long. And the president himself has said he had no objections to taking convicted criminals and putting them in the same jail in El Salvador. there is there's a treadmill that we're potentially getting on here that could result in the erosion of rights for American citizens. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason that we should be concerned about this. People who are in this country deserve the ability to go before courts and have courts make determinations about whether they can stay, whether they should leave, how they should be treated. And this administration wants to take upon itself, to the derogation of the ability of the courts and certainly of the legislative branch, the ability to decide everything. This is how you get authoritarianism. This is remarkably similar to kind of what happened in Europe in the 30s. It's consistent with what we saw happen in Hungary and in Turkey in later days over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that's not a path that this country wants to go down. And I want people to understand this. If you don't stand up and fight now, if you don't take a position now, it's going to be too late. We can't say we can wait just a little longer. No, no. The time is now to stand up and do all that we can to fight this administration. Now.
Do you believe that the lawyers in this country, particularly the private sector lawyers of big firms, are doing enough to stand up for the people who are at the sharp end of the stick with this administration? And I do mean the people who have been treated the worst. I mean immigrants, and I mean the trans community, and I mean other people who have just had rights stripped from them even more aggressively than the rest of the country is experiencing. I feel like we're not seeing a rush to the barricades on behalf of the legal community in the way that we did in the first Trump administration, and I think that's because the legal community, big law in particular, is afraid of Trump and is trying to appease him rather than confront him. I wonder if you share that view.
Yeah, some are doing, I think, the right thing. Some are being timid. Some are showing themselves to be cowards. Some are making business determinations when they ought to be making legal decisions or putting into their decision-making a sense of moral obligation. And I've been disappointed by some in the legal profession about the ways in which they have interacted with this administration. You can't make deals with these folks. This is an attack on the rule of law. They want to go after people who are their critics. They want to go after people who would defend those people, that is, the lawyers. They want to have a Justice Department that fires lawyers who tell the truth to judges. They want to then go after the judges themselves. This is all part of a piece. It's all about the erosion of the rule of law so that Donald Trump will have the ability to have authoritarian powers in this nation. This is the person who the founders tried to put a system in place to prevent from coming to power. And unless we as lawyers stand up, joined by the judiciary, and somehow get Congress to find out that it has power within our system of government, we will lose that which defines this nation, that which makes this nation exceptional. That is really what is at stake. But you have to get granular. And every lawyer, I think, has to ask him or herself, every law firm has to ask itself, where do we stand? You know, it was an easy thing after George Floyd was murdered, when we had a videotape of a black man with a cop with his knee on that man's throat as he was pleading for his life. It was an easy thing at that point, as horrible as that was, an easy thing to come and say that we are against that, we are for the rule of law, people like that cop need to be held accountable. Now it's not so easy. Now it's difficult. And as Tom Paine said, you know, this is not the day of the Sunshine Patriot. Oh, this is the day of the Sunshine Patriot. We have to make sure that when it gets tough, we're prepared to do the difficult things. Some, unfortunately, I think too many have made the determination that they're not willing to make the necessary sacrifices for the very system that has sustained them, not only economically, but given them privileges that we as lawyers have. It is our responsibility to stand up for the rule of law.
I hear the urgency in your voice there. I also believe that those who have made the weak decision thus far should know that it isn't a decision forever, and they can turn around. They can recognize that they were wrong and turn that around. Mr. Attorney General, if you wouldn't mind holding on for one more moment, I have a lot more to ask you. Can you stick with us?
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back with more with former Attorney General Eric Holder. Stay with us.